Good evening, everyone. If everyone could find a seat, we'll get started. Thank you. First off, I want to do our safety message of the evening. If there is severe weather, which it doesn't look like, or some sort of fire, something like that, these are the exits out. So we will have the doors open, you exit out and exit to the outside. If severe weather, there is a basement. We have folks standing by who would lead us down to the basement, which is over by the restrooms. So thank you. On behalf of the Corporation Commission, I want to welcome you to tonight's public hearing and thank you for attending. My name is Susan Duffy and I serve as the chair of the Kansas Corporation Commission. I'm joined by my colleagues, Dwight Keene and Andrew French. Commissioners, would each of you like to make a brief comment? And I'm looking at Dwight Keene.
Yes, thank you very much to all of you for taking time from your schedules to join us this evening. This public comment portion of the process of going through reviewing rate cases is really quite important. It's important that we benefit from your insights and your concerns. So we look forward to that part of the program when we can join you and hear from you. We're very pleased that you're willing to take time to do this. It's an important part of the process. Thank you again for being here.
Commissioner French.
Well, I'll just echo the same sentiment. It is very nice to see so many people come out on a Thursday night and give us this part of your evening. The public comments in these dockets, they do become part of the official record in the docket. They are things that we can consider when we make our decision. And I think that's really important to remember that we can give these comments weight. And so we look forward to hearing what feedback you all have. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. To make participation in the hearing as convenient as possible for Evergy customers across the state, we have scheduled 3 public hearings in this matter. This past Tuesday, the Commission held a hearing in Topeka. Tonight's hearing is the second, and the final hearing will be in Wichita on July 27th. For those unable to join us in person, each hearing is being broadcast live on YouTube and recorded for later viewing. In addition, remote participation via Zoom with advanced registration, we've made that available for those wishing to make a comment or ask a question. So I will now call to order the public hearing in docket number 23 EKCE 775 RTS. This docket was initiated by Evergy to request approval to increase its rates. Tonight's hearing will operate in 2 parts. Part 1 will be an informational session. During this portion of the hearing, all of us 3 commissioners will recess to another room to allow Evergy, the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board, and commission staff to make brief presentations. Following the presentations, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions. After the question and answer session in part 1, there'll be a short break. In part 2, the commissioners will rejoin the meeting and hear your comments. All of your comments will become part of the official record in this docket. The legislature has charged the commission with the responsibility of protecting the rights of all interested parties, including those of the general public. To be sure, the commissioners consider your comments important in the decision-making process, and we want to hear them. If you plan to address the commission with comments in part 2, please complete the sign-in sheet just outside the door, and Linda's standing there. She'll make sure she gets your name if you've not already done that. I know all of you signed in. That's a requirement of this building that anybody who attends signs in, and then there is a second sheet. So make sure you got your name on the second sheet. For those of you participating by Zoom, you will receive instructions at the start of the comment session. All right, we're going to recess now, and I will turn the hearing over to the Commission's General Counsel and Pre-Hearing Officer in this docket, Mr. Brian Fedotin. He is the moderator for Part 1 of tonight's agenda. I hope you find it interesting, and we'll see you for Part 2. Thank you. The Commission stands in recess until the conclusion of Part 1 of this hearing.
Thank you, Chair Duffy. Good evening. As Chair Duffy just stated, we'll begin Part 1 with brief presentations, first by Evergy, then by the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board, or CURB as they're commonly referred to, and then the Commission's technical staff. Afterwards, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of all three. At this time, we can start with Darren Ives, the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for Evergy. Mr. Ives.
Thank you, Mr. Fedotin. Hello and good evening. As Mr. Fedotin mentioned, my name is Darren Ives. I am the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for Evergy. I'll be providing some of the details of our rate review request here tonight on behalf of Evergy. In addition to me tonight, we have a number of Evergy representatives that are here and can help answer specific questions that you may have regarding current projects or individual account specifics, including 2 customer service reps that are sitting at a table just outside the room, and they have direct access to customer account information should you be interested in working directly with them on an account question this evening. Thank you for being here this evening and engaging in this stage of the state's rate review process. All right. So I'll start on slide 2. This slide represents our Kansas service territories for Evergy. The green area is the Evergy Kansas Central Territory, which actually comes to probably within about 4 miles or 4.5 miles of where we're located here today. And that's the legacy West Star service territory. The blue area is the Evergy Kansas Metro Territory, or the legacy KCP&L Kansas service territory. And we're actually located in the Kansas Metro Territory tonight. As you may remember, the 2 companies combined 5 years ago in June of 2018 after lengthy regulatory proceedings, culminating in approval to combine from the KCC as well as from a number of other state and federal regulatory agencies. In receiving the KCC approval, there were a significant number of conditions and commitments that were agreed to by Evergy, including a condition that Evergy would not request a rate-based review for 5 years post that merger, but would be required to file a base rate review at the completion of that 5 years. This is that required rate review. During the 5 years since the merger, Evergy has met all of the commitments and conditions from the KCC merger order, and we have presented that evidence in our filing of this case. Importantly, one of the primary benefits of the merger was the ability to consolidate operations and access the benefits of a larger locally owned regulated utility. We have been highly successful in that work, unlocking across Evergy more than $1 billion in accumulated merger cost savings in that 5 years. This substantially exceeds our 5-year estimated savings that we discussed with the KCC and parties in 2018 of approximately $620 million. We are very proud of the work our employees have done in the first 5 years and the combined company that we have created. and we are pleased that the annualized value of the achieved savings is reflected in this rate review, providing substantial benefits to Kansas customers that would not have been available had we not successfully combined the companies. Next slide, please. Slide 3, our driving focus since the merger has been to provide affordable, reliable, and sustainable service to all of our Evergy customers. That framework underlies all of our strategic and operating decisions at Evergy. In Kansas, there's been substantial discussion over the last several years regarding Evergy's rates and Kansas's regional rate competitiveness. Slide 3 highlights that since 2017, certainly in part driven by our merger commitment for no base rate reviews in the first 5 years and our success in achieving merger benefits, our all-in Evergy Kansas residential rates decreased slightly from 2017 to where they are today, while regional rates rose on average almost 12%, and cumulative inflation over the same period was over 20%. These strong results have our Kansas rates now currently placed near the average in regional rate competitiveness. While we are pleased with the progress since 2017, we recognize the pressure faced by our customers in these high inflationary times and know that we must continue to appropriately balance affordability and reliability in providing service to our customers. Next slide, please. Turning to the specifics of our rate review request. It's important to remind everybody that while we have combined our companies corporately, rates remain different for Evergy Kansas Central and Evergy Kansas Metro customers. The systems serving our respective Central and Metro customers have been designed and constructed separately over many decades to best serve the needs of our Central and Metro customers, and the characteristics and needs of Central and Metro service territory and customers are different. For example, there are over 2.5 times the number of Central customers as compared to Kansas Metro customers. And as you saw on slide 2, the geographic footprint over which we serve Central customers is dramatically larger and more dispersed than that of our Kansas Metro customers, which are generally clustered around the greater Kansas City metro area. On slide 4, we provide the Kansas Central request. We are requesting an additional $204 million of annual recovery for cost to serve Central's customers, or an increase of about 9.77%. This is a significant request in Kansas to continue to provide the reliable service needed by our Central customers. When considered over the period since our last rate request, the annual growth in rates from this request is well under 2% annually, meaning while we have requested additional revenues for the costs we have and are incurring, we have managed these cost increases well below the historical rate of inflation. We know our customers would prefer to not face cost increases, and as I have mentioned, we have focused on affordability. We are pleased that this amount was lowered by approximately $90 million in annual cost savings that we have achieved, mostly from the merger efficiencies I've discussed, and that we have made substantial system and service improvements, all while managing this request below the historical level of inflation. Next slide, please. Slide 5 provides more detail on some of the specifics of the Central request. Working from left to right on the bar chart, the primary driver for the rate increase is the recovery of new infrastructure investments made to improve the resiliency, reliability, and the efficiency of our system since we last had a rate review. This amount reflects that we added almost $500 million in incremental invested assets, as well as Central's share of common assets, mostly information technology assets, that were added and owned by Metro, but are billed to Central based on its usage. The next bar, the change in depreciation rates, reflects changes in rates to recover investments to match currently estimated useful life of those assets. This is based on a detailed study done by experts in estimating the remaining life of assets. The second component of the depreciation request is new to this case. It requests recovery for amounts to dismantle primarily fossil generating stations in the future when they are retired. It is best practice to recover the cost to close and remove generating stations today from customers that are receiving energy from those facilities rather than from future customers after the facility is closed. The third bar from the left on that chart is his historical item resolution. This item is unique to Central and addresses prior decisions and impacts to Central's customer rates that are being resolved in this case. There are two categories here, two categories of items that have historically provided reductions in Central's rates. First, in the 1980s, Central took out corporate-owned life insurance policies on selected employees, and the KCC agreed that for 40 years, there would be a stream of benefits used to reduce customers' rates. This was adopted to help offset some of the increased cost to customers from the construction of the Wolf Creek Nuclear Generating Station. Over the 40 years, these life insurance benefits will have reduced customer rates in the aggregate by almost $800 million. And in the rates in effect since 2018, have reduced rates by about $40 million annually. This 40-year program is expiring in early 2025, and those benefits to rates will no longer be available. This case reflects a reduction in that benefit to phase it out over the next 4 years. The second is similar in that Central's rates that were set in 2018 reflect reductions to customer rates for multi-year contracts to sell power from Central Generation Supply to certain municipals and cooperatives. Those contracts have expired and the rate credits from those contracts are no longer available to lower customer rates. Lastly, in the green bar, as I've already discussed, there are almost $90 million of annual cost savings that we have achieved since the merger in helping to offset almost 25% of the incremental cost to serve our Central customers. Next slide. Starting at slide 6, we provide the request and details for the Kansas Metro rate review. In summary, the Metro request is for an additional $14 million of annual recovery for costs to serve the Metro customers, or about an increase of 0.4%. As I noted in the discussion of the Central request, the Central and Metro systems are separate and have been built over decades to serve their respective customers. Additionally, the Metro request does not have the historical issues to resolve in this docket that I outlined for Central. And similar to Central, we are pleased that this amount was lowered by approximately $39 million in annual cost savings, mostly again from the merger efficiencies, while we have made substantial system and service improvements in the Metro area. Slide 7. I think we can go to the next slide. That we just discussed that. Slide 8 is my last slide. We wanted to provide the information should you have questions about your account. There are several methods to get your questions addressed, including, as I mentioned at the start, we have customer representatives here tonight that are available to work directly with you. In addition to that, we've listed our contact center information, the location or the availability of our on-site Evergy Connect centers, and then the information to sign up for online account access to look at your specific information. That concludes my presentation, and at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. David Nickel with the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board. Thank you. What?
There we go. Good evening. My name is David Nickel. I'm Consumer Counsel for the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board, known by its acronym CURB. CURB represents the residential and small commercial ratepayers in Kansas in these rate cases. I've had an opportunity to meet some of you before the meeting, and I want to thank you for coming up and saying hello. Believe me, that's the highlight of my day, and I've had a pretty good day. So it's nice to have an opportunity to meet you and talk to you about this case and what CURB does. So thank you. And thank you for attending tonight and for expressing your opinions concerning the impact of this rate case upon your lives. Before I talk a little bit about this rate case, please allow me to talk a little bit about CURB. Would you please advance the slide? CURB was formed in 1989 by the Kansas Corporation Commission. It was formed to be a division of the KCC to represent residential and small commercial ratepayers because it's impractical for these ratepayers to represent themselves individually before the KCC. In 1991, the Kansas legislature made CURB an independent governmental agency. Presently, it is separate from the KCC. It has its own mission, its own budget, and its own personnel. Next, please. CURB is composed, the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board is composed of 5 board members. The governor appoints these board members for 4-year staggered terms. These are the present members of the CURB. Next slide. The governor appoints 1 board member from each Kansas congressional district, and 1 board member is appointed to serve at large. Each board member serves voluntarily, dedicating substantial time in analyzing utility matters on behalf and for the benefit of the citizens within their districts. Next. In this case, as well as all other cases, the board members direct the actions of CURB staff. CURB staff currently consists of 8 state employees. There are 3 attorneys, including me, 3 utility rate analysts, and 3 administrative professionals. Next slide. CURB's primary duties are to represent residential and small commercial ratepayers before the KCC, before the Kansas legislature, and before the Kansas appellate courts. CURB staff also performs miscellaneous and related utility-related duties, such as customer outreach or public outreach, or utility-related policy research. Next slide. Here's a benefit or breakdown of how CURB technical staff spent its time during the last fiscal year, ending in June 2022. As you can see, CURB staff spent most of its non-administrative time involved in KCC cases, which include utility rate cases. CURB's involvement in utility rate cases is its most important duty, as these cases significantly affect the quality of Kansans' life and the productivity of our small businesses. In every rate case, including this one, CURB presents evidence supporting low utility rates. We do our very best in these regards, but our enthusiasm is bounded. Please allow me to explain. Next. Kansas statutes govern the regulation of utilities by the KCC. KSA 66-101B prescribes the obligations of Evergy as an electric utility doing business in Kansas. It essentially states every electric public utility shall furnish adequate and sufficient service at just and reasonable rates and conditions. In CURB's testimony in this case, we will express our opinion as to the reasonableness of the rates by which Evergy can provide reliable and safe electric service. Next slide. Indeed, while low rates are really important, reliability is also very important. We want our electric service to be continuously on despite the high winds and ice storms throughout Evergy's territory, in spite of the 100-degree-plus heat or the sub-zero cold, and notwithstanding the highs and lows of customer demand. We acknowledge that this obligation requires investment in electric generation plants, transmission lines, distribution lines, a workforce, and other items of capital and expense. Moreover, we are bound by the United States constitutional and Kansas statutory mandates that require the KCC to allow Evergy a reasonable opportunity to recover the cost of providing reliable service. All Kansans are bound by these laws. Next slide. So in this case, as in other rate cases, the ultimate question is what reasonable rates would allow Evergy to provide the reliable electric service that Kansans need. CURB has retained a number of experts to help it analyze this question. Now, in prior rate cases, CURB's experts have posed a number of general concerns that relate to the reasonableness of rates. In most of these past rate cases, the biggest driver of rate increases has been the amount of capital investment and the rate of return on common equity requested by the utility. So in rate cases, CURB will address both of these issues. Additionally, CURB's experts generally like to see a low customer charge in rate cases. It's consistent with energy conservation, and it allows some consumers an opportunity to reduce their energy cost by lower usage. In this particular case, Evergy is asking to recover a substantial amount of capital, as Mr. Ives has pointed out. They are asking for a rate of return of 10.25%, and they've asked to raise the residential customer charge to $16.71. CURB will present evidence on all of these three issues. However, I must point out that CURB is still presently reviewing the applications and over 1,000 pages of testimony and data associated with them. So at this time, I cannot state definitively all of the particular issues or positions that CURB will bring before the commission in this case. Next slide. But CURB's perspective in this rate case is only part of the testimony that the KCC must consider. In addition to CURB, several other parties will intervene in this case. Their opinions on rate case issues will likely differ from Evergy's and from CURB's, as well as the perspectives of other interveners. Next slide. That is not only expected, it is desired. The evidence presented by all stakeholders must, by law, be considered. Kansas ratepayers are lucky to have a set of commissioners who take into account all of the evidence and very judiciously weigh the same. And the KCC has a very dedicated and intelligent staff who, after taking into account all the perspectives of all the stakeholders, will advise the KCC as to the appropriate balance of these interests. Of course, the KCC staff is only advisory. The commissioners can and should take their own positions based upon the evidence in the record. Next slide. Nonetheless, CURB fully understands that electric rates must be affordable to you. Although we are concerned about all Kansas ratepayers, we are especially concerned about low-income and fixed-income ratepayers. CURB has asked the Kansas legislature to enact legislation to allow it and other stakeholders to work together to make energy affordable for all. We recognize that a high energy burden may mean sacrificing food or medicine or other essential needs to keep warm or cool in extreme weather. CURB has also supported a set of energy efficiency programs proposed by Evergy to the KCC. In CURB's view, energy efficiency presents a means by which individual ratepayers can help to lower their own energy cost while enjoying a reasonable level of comfort. At the same time, these energy efficiency measures help to lower the cost of energy for all ratepayers. Next slide. In addition to these partial solutions to energy affordability, CURB would call your attention to one particular aspect of this case. Evergy proposes a new slate of voluntary time of use rates, known as TOU rates. These TOU rates are a significant departure from traditional energy pricing. Unlike traditional energy pricing, time of use kilowatt hour rates are higher or lower depending upon the time during which one uses electricity. If structured prudently, TOU rates can allow ratepayers to control their energy bills, while in turn helping to lower energy costs for all ratepayers. The energy rates for TOU off-peak and super off-peak times are substantially lower than peak TOU rates and, for that matter, the proposed energy charge for traditional energy pricing. So some ratepayers may be able to lower their bills by their careful use of electricity and the use of these TOU rates. We recognize that TOU rates may not fit every ratepayer. So it's up to every ratepayer to determine whether those TOU rates would be beneficial. Importantly, Evergy's TOU rates are voluntary. Next slide. I wish to reiterate that CURB will be fully engaged in this rate case to attempt to keep Evergy's rates as low as legally permissible. As it has in other rate cases, CURB will treat the need for any rate rate increase with considerable skepticism. But even with these efforts, we acknowledge that energy remains unaffordable for some ratepayers. Your testimonies will illuminate. So thank you for attending. Your concerns are important to all of us here. CURB's contact information is shown here. Again, thank you.
Okay, and now Ms. Carly Massentine of the KCC staff will make her presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. As Brian said, my name is Carly Massentine, and I am Senior Litigation Counsel representing the technical staff of the Kansas Corporation Commission. So I'm here tonight to give a high-level overview of the commission and how it operates, as well as explain how my clients, the technical staff of the commission, analyze Evergy's rate increase application. Now, for clarity's sake, I do want to make it known I do not represent the agency as a whole, nor do I represent the three commissioners, but rather I represent the individuals who are state employees working for the Kansas Corporation Commission in the Utilities Division. Next slide. The commission is a state agency headed by three commissioners who collectively act as a body in determining matters that come before them. The current commissioners are Chair Susan Duffy, Dwight Keene, and Andrew French. The commissioners are appointed by the governor and serve staggered 4-year terms. And would you click? Just one. Yep, perfect. So the commission has jurisdiction to oversee a number of industries operating in Kansas, from electric and natural gas to telecommunications to oil to motor carriers. The agency employs a staff of professionals within each of these industries who are available to provide guidance and input on the various technical issues that are involved in regulation of these industries. Next slide, please. And you can go ahead and you might have to click through several times. That's good. So administrative hearings at the commission look very similar to a trial that you would see in a regular district court. The commissioners act as judges. They hear and weigh the evidence. Witnesses testify before them, and they issue orders that then can be appealed into the judicial system. Staff, my clients, act as a party to the case. They develop and defend their own position, recognizing that staff's duty is owed to the state of Kansas as a whole and to the general public. And so up on the screen, there is a visualization of how that's all set up. At the top, you can see the three commissioners. Parties involved include the utility, here the applicant or Evergy, as well as commission staff, and then various interveners who represent a variety of different interests, and we will touch on that a bit down the road. But as you can see, all of these parties are separate and distinct entities in the case. And just like a court, it's the attorney for each of these parties' job to present that case to the commission. Next slide. So the commission staff are a group of dedicated state of Kansas employees that have tremendous amounts of education in a variety of fields, such as accounting, economics, engineering, and complex financial analysis. During proceedings before the commission, staff advocates for the general public, which is another way of saying that staff's main goal is to promote the public interest of the state of Kansas as a whole. So as I mentioned earlier, there are many different interveners in the docket currently, and many different interests at play in this proceeding. Most of you here tonight are members of the residential public who are here because you've heard about the rate increase and are concerned about what that might mean for your bill. In addition to the people here tonight from Evergy, CURB, and staff, involved in the docket are large industrial customers, schools, hospitals, large businesses, environmental groups, social justice groups, other government entities, and even other utilities operating in the state. All of these parties to the docket have their own interests that they are seeking to promote or preserve in the course of the proceedings. Staff has the ever-challenging job of objectively looking at all of those opinions and providing an independent, neutral, and balanced recommendation that furthers the public interest of the state as a whole. Next slide. And you may have to click through several times here as well. There you go. So I'm not going to reiterate the details of Evergy's proposal, as you've already heard it from them tonight. And most of you are here because you heard about it even before their presentation and you have concerns. So what I did think would be useful for us tonight is to walk back a bit at this juncture and give a bird's eye view of the system that led us here. I often have friends and family ask me when they find out what field I'm in, how it's possible that utilities in Kansas are allowed to be monopolies or some question to that effect. So I thought it would be useful to take some time tonight and explain the underlying principles that create the unique situation we are in, where you have something called where you have a fully regulated monopoly. Now, a utility is something that you can define as a natural monopoly. I will let you read through the definition on the screen there, but essentially a natural monopoly develops out of circumstance where there are no other players in the area capable of producing that good. An electric utility like Evergy is a perfect example of a natural monopoly. Not only is the type of service being provided one that is extremely unique with high startup costs that make new market entry difficult, if not impossible, but once an electric grid is in place and is set up to deliver power to all of the homes in any given community, it doesn't make much sense to then build a secondary grid in the same area. In addition to redundancy of both assets and costs, it could create confusion or technical difficulties if you had two operators trying to operate two grids in one area. Next slide, please. So to reiterate that, there actually is a Kansas law that states there cannot be two electric providers in any one given territory, for all of the reasons that are listed on the screen there above. A part of the KCC's function outside of these rate cases is actually to classify and map all of the different territories and ensure that any territory overlaps are remediated so that none of our utilities are in violation of the Retail Electric Suppliers Act. Next slide. And going further into the policy behind the structure, I want to focus for a few minutes on a concept called the regulatory compact. The overarching idea here is twofold. One, electricity is too important of a resource to be left entirely to the competitive private market. In the modern world, you could make an argument that electricity is perhaps our most important resource because it would be difficult to acquire or sustain food, water, and adequate shelter without electricity with the way that our society is set up. Yet private industry, no matter what type of good is being sold, is about a bottom line. And you can call that what you want, but without a profit margin, there is no reason for any industry to exist ever. But left unchecked, it's possible, and we have seen this, not in Kansas, but in other states, in extreme weather events, when it's not economic for the utility to go out and buy power because maybe it's super high priced because it's in super high demand. So the utility simply does not go out and buy the power, and the lights don't turn on, and that can be devastating to human life. Now, on the other side of the coin, it isn't the most efficient thing for the government to try and take on the task of fully providing the electric grid. That's a highly technical endeavor that requires expediency and technical proficiency. So in order to achieve both efficiency and assurance in public protection, the idea of the regulatory compact developed in law over time, where utilities are granted an exclusive service area with relative earnings stability in exchange for being fully regulated by the state. Next slide. Up on the screen here are just a few very high-level sources behind the idea of the regulatory compact. Kansas statutes require Evergy to provide efficient and sufficient service at just and reasonable rates. The Kansas Supreme Court has weighed in and added some dimension to what just and reasonable means. And that standard is what guides the commissioners in proceedings like these. So, commission staff, we look to determine that all of the interests at play are balanced, but particularly we are attempting to find a balance between the interests of Evergy's shareholders and its ratepayers, as well as that between ratepayers of today and the future. Next slide. In addition to the law just discussed, there's also a constitutional basis for why the utility is allowed to earn a reasonable profit on its investment in the equipment and the staffing that's required to run the electric grid. You have to remember the utility is a private business that is using private money to build and operate the electric grid, but its assets are being used to provide a necessary public service. So above and beyond the Kansas specific law that I just mentioned is a constitutional principle that the utilities property cannot be used for public purposes without just compensation. So to sum it up, as was done by the Kansas Supreme Court in 1999, and I'm going to have to walk over here. Essentially, the utility regulation is a big balancing act between balancing the needs of the utility to make it able to go out there and build and maintain its electric grid with the need to provide consumer protection and reasonably low prices for those consumers. Again, the law is explicit here in allowing Evergy to collect through its rates that reasonable and prudently incurred cost that it incurs to run the electric grid. And the law also provides Evergy an opportunity to earn a reasonable profit on that investment. Next slide. Before we get into how specifically the KCC goes about finding that proper balance, I wanted to zoom out a bit on the process as a whole. You've heard tonight from Evergy, who represents its interests as well as those of its shareholders, as well as CURB, who advocates on behalf of residential customers such as yourselves and small commercial businesses. Other parties, for example, in this case, currently, we have various gas companies operating in Kansas, as well as a couple oil refineries, the United States Department of Defense, the Kansas Chamber and Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce, the National Resources Defense Council, various large industrial businesses and manufacturing plants, the school district out of Sedgwick County have all been granted intervention thus far, and we have many petitions for intervention still pending. Each of these parties is reviewing Evergy's application and making recommendations on the appropriate or reasonable level of return, among other things. These parties are free to make comments on any aspect of Evergy's application that pertains to their interest group. They file testimony in the docket, engage in the data sharing process, and participate in any other legal proceedings that may occur. All of this makes the record of evidence on which the commissioners make the ultimate decision about whether Evergy's rates should increase, and if so, by how much. If you remember back a few slides, one of the prongs of that reasonableness test put forth by the Kansas Supreme Court requires the KCC to analyze and factor in the public interest when ruling on Evergy's application. The public interest means the state of Kansas as a whole, which is represented in pieces through each of the interveners that I just discussed. KCC staff, again, is tasked with balancing all of those interests and the public generally. Next slide. So going back to the KCC staff's role, commission staff are currently conducting an independent review of Evergy's proposal. This review includes an in-depth examination of Evergy's finances, which allows staff to evaluate the application for accuracy and for compliance with Kansas law. The investigation also includes identification of any positive or negative impacts on customers, the utility, and the public generally. During our investigation, staff determines what costs the utility is entitled to recover in rates, but perhaps more importantly for the audience here tonight, what costs maybe are not appropriate to recover from customers. Finally, staff also evaluates the structure of the utilities rates to ensure that they are fair and based on the underlying cost to serve each customer class. After its investigation is complete, staff submits written testimony that will indicate its position on the application, and we actively participate in the rate case process by advocating for that position throughout. Staff's role is not to help any one party over another, but rather to provide independent assistance to the commissioners so that they can balance those competing interests and evaluate the total impact of the application on the state of Kansas as a whole. Next slide. Staff's testimony is currently due in this docket on August 29th. And if you would like to follow along, you can go onto the commission's website. It's just kcc.ks.gov. There's a button on the top part of that website that will say commission filings. If you click there and then go down to docket filings, you can actually enter in the docket number and review every single document that's been filed in this docket thus far, and you can follow along with us that way. Next slide. The remaining deadlines in this docket are shown on the screen. Under the current schedule, the public comment period ends at 5 p.m. on September 29th. If you intend to submit a comment in this docket, you must do so by that date. And instructions for how to do so are on the next slide. So up here is information on other ways you can submit a public comment. The first way is tonight, following the presentations. Or you can send your comments to our public affairs office, either by phone, regular mail, or by email. We will leave this up here for just a few minutes if anybody wants to jot it down quickly. or take a photo of it. And again, you can continue to follow the proceedings along on our website. I should also mention there is also a KCC YouTube. So if you know how to access YouTube, you can type in Kansas Corporation Commission, watch all of our hearings. We also do really interesting work studies on a variety of topics. And so in conclusion, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. It really is valuable for you to be here. As one of the commissioners mentioned earlier, these comments go into that entire record of evidence that the commission uses to make their decision. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be here and provide that input for us. And thank you.
Thank you to all three of our presenters. Before we begin the question portion of the evening, just a reminder that this is the question portion of the evening. The commissioners aren't here. They will be here for part 2 to hear the actual comments. So the purpose of the question session is to ask Evergy staff or CURB questions about the application or the process. And again, we'll have a short break and then we'll actually do the comments for the commissioners' consideration. I know that there's a lot of people in the audience and probably a lot of questions. So we ask that you could limit yourself to one question at a time to ensure that everybody gets an opportunity to participate. And then if you have follow-up questions, to get back in line. For those of you participating via Zoom, there's a raise hand feature on Zoom. Please, if you wish to ask a question, click the raise hand, and when you're called upon, you'll be able to unmute your microphone. And we're going to try to jump between live speakers here and people on Zoom to get as many questions as we can. For those of you in the room, we have a microphone set up in the aisle. So please take turns and, you know, at the microphone, speak so everyone can hear you, identify yourself and the city you reside in. And again, I will be monitoring Zoom to try to see if there's a question on that front. And if anybody has any physical difficulty getting to the microphone, just signal and we'll make arrangements to get a microphone to you. So with that, we're ready for questions. And again, the microphone is in the center of the room. So anybody who has a question, please step forward and we'll call on you and we'll get this underway. Sir, yes, please feel free to go up to the microphone.
Does Evergy or any of its affiliates own Wolf Creek? Or what's the connection between Evergy and Wolf Creek?
We do own Wolf Creek. We actually own 94% of it. So it's in 2 parts.
And that's in what is it, Lacine?
Wolf Creek, it's in Burlington, Kansas.
Oh, Burlington. Are there any interests, property owned in Lacine, around in that area?
We have a generating facility in Lacine, Kansas.
Again, if we could try to limit ourselves to one question,
Okay.
so we can accommodate as many people as possible.
Okay, is there a hunting lodge or hunting facility owned by Evergy or any of the affiliates in that area?
I believe there is a facility, and I believe it's in the Lacine area. Yes.
Is that open to?
Sir, could you please give everybody else an opportunity? Thank you. Our next questioner.
My name is Jim. I have a copy here of a newsletter called Utility Dive. I don't know if it's accurate, but it says that Evergy wants to add 3,300 megawatts of renewable. I assume that means wind and solar. And 1,300 megawatts of advanced combined cycle that's hydrogen capable too. I assume you're talking about methane, natural gas combined cycle. While retiring 1,900 megawatts of coal capacity. Can you tell us why you want to retire coal capacity?
Yeah, so that's a good question. That information is from a 20-year integrated resource plan. So we look 20 years forward on what we need to be able to do to serve customers in the most cost-effective way with supply. So our coal facilities, some of them are as old as being built in the 1960s and 1970s. So at some point, equipment ages out of useful life. We also, as many people probably are aware, continue to have a number of regulations proposed on a state and federal level that may at some point make it not cost effective to run the coal facilities. So we look at options to have a balanced portfolio of renewables, gas, nuclear, coal, in order to try and meet our customers' needs.
My name is Dustin. I'm looking for clarification on the difference between the Metro and rest of Kansas. I live in Olathe, and as far as I can remember, I only used KCP&L, but it sounds like we might be considered part of Central Kansas in this rate change. How do we find out where that delineation is at?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we do have our service territories in certain areas do line up right next to each other. As staff mentioned, no utility can serve both. So I would suspect that if you were a KCPL customer prior to the merger, you are a Metro customer today. We did not change boundaries with the merger. You can confirm that either with our customer representatives out at the table tonight or on your online account. You can see whether you're a Metro or Central customer.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark. I just had a question. I read in the paper, I believe, or saw over the phone that the federal government just gave the state of Kansas 13, I can't remember if it was $1 billion to upgrade the grid in the state of Kansas. Are you just double dipping us?
No, that's a good question. There are a number of funds that have been made available from the federal government. Some of them are to invest in the grid. Some of them are to invest in electric vehicle infrastructure, a number of things that the government has made funds available to Kansas. So the things that are available to Evergy, we participate with the state agencies and make sure that we're not double dipping it, and that customers get the utilization of those funds. And if they don't relate to our service or the type of assets we do, the state has an agency that determines how to best spend those funds on behalf of Kansas.
And one other quick question. How many generating stations since you guys merged have you got left online?
We have a number, I would say, in addition to the nuclear, we probably have, 8 or more coal facilities. We have a significant number of gas facilities, particularly in the central area. And then we have a number of wind farms that have been in place since actually before we merged that remain in place.
So you've actually got 8 then major power plants.
Off the top of my head, it's 8 or 9 major coal facilities. Some of them have multiple units at the site.
Right, leasing.
Hi, I had a question regarding the 9.77% increase. There's no mention of what the term is on that. Is that just a flat number that'll continue for a few more years, or when can we sit here again in 3 years or 5 years and see another increase, or how does that work?
Well, it's a good question. It's the way the process works in Kansas, and in most jurisdictions, is when a party determines there's a revenue deficiency or a shortfall, then a case is created and goes through the process that you've heard a lot about. But those dollars are based on historical investments and costs that we've incurred at the time we come in. So it will be dependent upon the new build and the new spend and the new costs that may be incurred prospectively as to the timing of a future proceeding.
So that 9.7 is flat from next year forward for a few more years.
It would start in rates until the next time a case comes in, which generally in the state of Kansas, without the moratorium that I talked about, the 5 years, generally cases have on history of run anywhere in a 2 to 4 year timeline before we need to come back in and review
Thank you.
rates.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I just have one quick question. It's actually a two-part question. Do you guys know what the four most productive, best ROI power plants are there in the state of Kansas, and the two worst that actually have no ROI, return on investment? Can you name them?
I do not have that information with me.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Hello, Angie Sheeprick. I understand that Evergy had record profits in 2022. And I'm curious about what percentage of the record profits did you set aside for improving the infrastructure, helping to connect the renewable energy to the grid and that type of thing? What percentage is set aside of this profit?
Yeah, it's a good question. Utility financial statements are a little bit different because of the rate regulated monopoly situation that staff talked about. Profits when they come in, actually, because customers are paying for the cost to serve and the shareholder return on the investment, the profits are the piece that's available for shareholders, either from retention to keep the business solid or through the payment of cash dividends so that they actually can get some level of annual return on their investment in Evergy.
So they are taken care of first before anything else?
Well, no, actually, they provide the funds so that the customers are taken care of first with the investments. And then in the future, when we come in for a rate change, they start to get recovery of the monies that they provided for the customer investment.
And Dustin, again, this might be for the commission staff. I don't know. Your presentation was saying that over the last 5 years, there was no rate increase, but that you've been tracking about a 2% increase in inflation or costs that you're now applying to this 9.77%. My question is, when the agreement was that there'd be no rate increase for 4 or 5 years, whatever that was it understood that you would be tacking on the cost during that time and then adding it to the current request for rate increase?
I think that might be a question for me, because I think I might not have been clear in the presentation. Or that's not what the presentation was intended to say. What the presentation says is that 9.77% increase is based on the historical costs we've incurred that are different than when rates were set 5 years ago. And it was simply comparing to the fact that historical inflation runs about 2% a year. It's not picking up inflation. It's just a comparison to show how it relates to inflation.
So just to clarify, this 9.77% increase is not because you haven't asked for a rate increase in the last 4 or 5 years. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say that. I would say it reflects the recovery of investments that we made during that period, as well as the change in costs like labor costs or other things from what was in rates back when they were set in 2018. So again, we set rates, new rates in a request like this on historical cost. So the staff can probably give you a view on their assessment of the moratorium. But that's the difference between what I was trying to say and then saying that it's picking up inflation.
To keep from taking too long, I will ask that again. So next person.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brad. I'm live in Lenexa, and my question is about the metro rate increase being about what, $3.50 on average per month. Does that also include the, if you looked at your utility bill, the surcharges, the fees, the riders, the taxes, which all, typically change seasonally or monthly based on various things like fuel, what have you. Does that include those or not?
It's a good question, and it does not. What in Kansas, when we come in for a base rate review like this docket, it addresses just that the base components in that rate, the riders and the other items, the fuel charge or the property tax or the things that you mentioned, those run through separate and distinct processes for review with the staff and with parties in the state of Kansas. So they are included. I would just add they are included in the analysis that I gave of what the rates change has been from 2017 to current, and showed that residential rates were actually down a little bit compared to 2017, but they're not included in what we look at in this case.
Thank you. I'm Carlos Rondon, and I'm engineer electrical. I understand that the plan is to decommission the Lawrence Energy Center, 515 megawatts, and the Jeffrey Energy Center, 2.16 gigawatts, for a total of 2.6 gigawatts, 2.16 gigawatts. The plan is to replace this with 3.2 gigawatts of renewables. So my question is, how long it will take to do that transition? How many years will do that? And is this price increase is related with financing that transition? And I want to point out that these plants are in operation in compliance with the EPA. So they are, otherwise they don't operate. So my concern is that we are transferring the financing of this transition to the customers, and how much is the time before that happens, how many years it will take, and if the company has been done any study on the impact on farming areas that are going to be used for solar generation and the wind.
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's a pretty full question. So let me take it in parts. The changes for Lawrence and for Jeffrey that you talk about are all things that are identified in our 20-year integrated resource plan that I talked about earlier, where we look forward on what we think needs to occur in order to supply our customers over the next 20 years. So many of the fossil plant changes don't begin until close to 2030 and for years following that. Some of the renewable additions are scheduled to start coming in a little bit in advance of those, because we have to build the capacity and the energy availability through natural gas or the renewable resources, so that when we do get the point to shut down coal, we have a continuity of supply and service for customers. So we look at that long-term planning horizon, and we continually evaluate that and update that review every year. So there are changes that occur as you get changes in federal regulations or changes in what's going on in the market. So it's constantly evaluated, and we go through that with staff and stakeholders annually.
Hello, thanks to everybody for being here. My question or comment is mostly addressed to the utilities division, everybody consisting of that area. And this morning I was looking at consumer reports, and I'm wondering if they have also done so. That indicates what's going on, similar to our meeting across the country. And it states that the individual rate increases aren't fair, and those that are being hardest hit are getting like a 17% increase, whereas those in larger homes and incomes have only like a 4 to 6% increase. So that's leading up to why is someone like myself, why should I have any kind of incentive to conserve? And I should probably use as much electricity as I can, have a much lower increase in my rate. So, ta-da, that's it.
Well, yeah, sure. Good evening. My name is Justin Grady. I work in the utilities division. What I would say is it's a really good point, and it's really a question of rate design. And I think that Mr. Nickel mentioned earlier that one of the biggest issues of contention in a case like this, one of the biggest areas that we evaluate is if this company gets a rate increase, what percentage of that increase is flowed through the fixed portion of the bill versus the volumetric. And that's really where a customer's usage patterns affect at the end of the day, from conservation and also how an individual customer, how a rate increase flows through to the individual customer's bill. I would say that the only thing that the public can see right now in terms of where the rates may actually end up is what the company's request has been, because we haven't filed testimony yet, and CURB hasn't filed testimony, and the industrial interveners haven't filed testimony. But I would just say that that's definitely a major focus of ours. We have an entire section in our division called the Rates and Economics section. We have people whose sole training over the last 20 years is focusing on the exact topic that we're talking about here, rate design. There are PhDs in economics actually that focus on exactly that thing. And that's who we have that do our rate design. So I guess, more to come on that, but we don't have a filed position yet.
Proceed, please.
Hi, so my question is for Evergy. As discussed before, you guys are allowed to profit off of rates, as you should. My question is, has Evergy over the last decade or however long you've owned Wolf Creek, have you set aside part of those profits knowing that Wolf Creek and other stations have a usable lifespan of 40 years or so? Have you set aside reservations, or I think that's the word I'm looking for. Reserved, sorry, thank you. Knowing that you would need to build new stations, and if not, why?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, utility financials are a little bit different than a traditional business, but utilities generally are getting funded through rates for things that they've already spent or already are spending. So they're recovering dollars that are necessary to pay the shareholders and the debt investors the returns on the funds that they've already provided, that have already resulted in assets put into service. So there's not really a mechanism built into rate regulated utilities to forward set reserves aside for the next investments. Those come through the rates. Generally, I think you saw in the staff presentation earlier that one of the balances is between current and future customers. So you wouldn't want to be in a position of charging current customers the type of money that would create a reserve that benefits future customers. The current customers pay for what they're using. The future customers pay for what they're using.
Got it. Thank you.
And I want to reserve plenty of time for commissioner comments before the commissioner. So everybody that's in line will give you an opportunity to ask your questions, but we'll probably cut off questions shortly thereafter. So if somebody urgently wants to ask a question, I'd suggest you get in line, please. Go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Doug. Can you have the nice graph of percentage increase over the last 5 years? 2 questions. First is, where do we currently rank cost per kilowatt hour compared to these other states?
Yeah, so currently we rate just a little bit below the average for the peer states that we typically benchmark a bit against. Staff can probably talk a little bit about this too, because we, as well as the staff, provide updates annually to the legislature on regional rate competitiveness. So we have seen progress as you saw that trajectory of where our rates have come in over the last 5 compared to the others. But to be fair, and as I mentioned in my comments, the work's not over yet, right? We have to continue to focus on affordability as we move forward and invest in the system.
So
that
we're
we can
talking
get back to
Kansas,
the middle.
we're talking Kansas Metro and then the central part of Kansas. Where do these rate increases come from? Is it the cost of kilowatt hour, demand, a little bit of both on commercial end?
It's a little bit of both. When you talk about, you heard the staff talk about rate design.
Right.
So one of the things that we do when we go through a case like this is we not only look at the design of how much of any required increase would be picked up by residentials or commercials or industrials, but we also look amongst all the parties of how much of it goes into a demand charge versus a kilowatt hour charge versus a customer charge. So all of that gets decided in this proceeding with the input from all the various stakeholders that you've heard from.
Hi, my name is Mary Kay Grimm. I'm from Lenexa, Kansas. First of all, let me just say I really appreciate having energy in my home, and I appreciate the hard work of all your employees and everyone who, goes out there in the middle of winter and during an ice storm and getting things back up and running as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
That being said, you're welcome. I have about 20 questions, but I'm going to really try to just keep it at a minimum. I do want to say that I disagree with Evergy putting the cost of acquiring the most recent wind facility onto your customers, in addition to having us cover the costs of operating the facility, and then you're just going to turn around and bill us for the energy that's produced by that facility. I do appreciate the fact that you're incorporating wind facilities, and I would like to see more of those. However, I do disagree with putting us with $150 million over and above the rate increases that you're going to charge. But the question that I've chosen to ask has to do with the company-owned, corporate-owned life insurance policy that you want to discontinue that was begun in 1985. It would be my guess that there are still people who have that life insurance policy, and I would imagine that some of them are getting close to maybe their families being able to benefit from that, depending on what stage of they're in. My question for you is, what's going to happen to the equity that those policy holders have been putting into the system for so long? Is Evergy going to keep that, or are they going to give it back to the people who paid that in for years and years? And how many policy holders are going to be affected by the discontinuation of those life insurance policies?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I might take 2 seconds and address the wind farm since you brought it up. So the wind farm absolutely is just like any other generating resource that we put in for the benefit of customers. The recovery of the investment and the operating cost would be part of what we would build into rates. The revenues that come off of a wind farm are actually part of the component that benefits customers by reducing your overall fuel line item that comes in on the bills. So it's not an additional charge. That's the benefit that customers get from a wind farm producing energy.
Okay, but that's not how I read it in the flyer and in the documentation that was provided, that you wanted to have the rate increase, and you also wanted to recoup the $150 million that since closed on, you purchased the farm, and the operating costs and stuff like that. I mean, it just seems like it just seems like it's stacking it up. I'm also curious how this is going to show up on my bill because I've already got 2 energy charges, an additional 6 just miscellaneous weirdo charges. I can remember when KCP&L just had like, a one charge. You had one charge, it was your energy charge. You had, taxes and, you could see that your kilowatt hours and stuff like that. But, and people really need that level pay plan. And you've got the rotating average or the rolling average now, which is fine. But I'm just really concerned as somebody who's got 2 jobs right now. I'm working about 55 hours a week. One, I work my full schedule of hours. My health is not great. I'm the only breadwinner in my household. And for a lot of people, this is just going to be one more thing that puts them over the edge because the rents and just the cost of living skyrocketed so much. And you've got companies out of New Jersey who are buying up all the apartment complexes in the area. It's very concerning to have an additional rate increase on top of that with the request to incur additional fees to, recoup costs that you've spent.
And so real quick, I'd just say, I could probably during the break or after this session, talk to you a little bit more detailed about the confusion on the language on the wind. Probably don't have time to go through that with other questions here today. On the corporate owned life insurance, I would just say that there have been benefits that have been built into rates for those 40 years that customers have gotten to take advantage of as a result of those life insurance policies being in place. And that was kind of how it was laid out 40 years ago when all the parties agreed it was the right thing to do to offset some of the cost of Wood Creek.
But aren't your life insurance
Can we
policies
please move
benefiting?
on? We've got a line of questioners and I apologize. We're trying to accommodate
I
as much as the
understand.
public
I'm
and
just concerned about the employees who are going to be losing their life insurance.
we'll take comments later and you can
I
add
would
that
just say
comment or add it.
there's no loss of policies as a result of this.
Hello, I'm Dustin again. I just have
Still,
a real
yes.
fast question, and that is, when was the last time that you asked for a rate increase of above 9%?
I don't remember exactly, but I know we had some requests above 9%, probably back in the 2010, 2012, when we were putting in a coal facility and some
And was
coal
that,
retrofits and some other work.
just for clarification, KCP&L or Westar or both?
KCPL for sure, and I know Westar had a couple relatively significant increases kind of back in that same time frame for investments made in generation.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gary Wamos. I live in Stillwell, Kansas. And during the presentation, there was mention about Evergy being locally owned, which piqued my interest because my understanding is that Evergy is an IOU, which is an investor-owned utility. So I'm trying to understand that the statement about Evergy being locally owned. Maybe I misunderstood what was said, but that's just my question.
Yeah, so you might have caught me on a technicality. We are an investor-owned utility, so we are owned by shareholders all across the country, including, by teachers' pension funds and people that live here in Kansas City as well. We are locally managed and we are locally controlled by the management and the employees that serve here. There are other utilities. The point I was trying to make is there are other utilities that are owned by funds based out of other countries or by utilities that are headquartered on a coast, and we are not. We're headquartered in Topeka.
Yeah, I thought maybe the case was that a large share of the investors were local. And so I was just kind of curious. I mean, I could probably find that information out, but thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
I think there were some ladies in front of you in line that you may have accidentally jumped ahead of. Is that the woman in the green shirt? Were you in line before or? Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Harrison from Lenexa. I was wondering how much you spend on lobbying each year, the State House.
Yeah, So I don't know that number off the top of my head, but
Can you give me maybe an estimate would be great.
I'll give you the estimate of how much our customers pay for lobbying. And it's zero because it's one of the sets of costs that we and the staff take out of a case in our shareholders pay.
I was just wondering, I'll make it quick, but you said you're a natural monopoly, right? Incurring from high costs. So I was just wondering how you're a natural monopoly when you spend so much money lobbying in the State House.
I would just say we are in the State House to protect the interest of our business, just like every other entity that's over there in the State House.
Thank you.
This question is for the Kansas Corporation Commission and for Evergy. And the slide up there, and I wasn't planning on asking a question until I seen a contradiction. Avoid wasteful duplication is either a mandate or a statute or something like that. So how do you reconcile renewable energy is a duplication, it's redundant, it is not base load, and it's not reliable. So how do you avoid those facts with avoid wasteful duplication?
So thanks for looking my way, Darren. I'll take that first.
I'm happy to answer the second part when you're done.
Yeah, so I do think it's a good question. Seriously, sir. You know, the statute that you're referencing was the Retail Electric Suppliers Act, and there's obviously a specific meaning to that particular phrase, which is that, you know, there cannot be more than one retail electric supplier in a specific geographic area. That's the whole wasteful duplication of services. You know, the question of additional renewable generation in the state and the role that our utilities should play is a big one. I mean, it's the sort of thing that is definitely it's a policy issue that's debated at the KCC and at the legislature. You know, there is some history, of course, that has influenced a pretty significant amount of the renewables. In other words, we used to have a renewable energy standard in this state. We no longer do. I will say that the last large renewable facility that Westar, Evergy Central's predecessor, put into rates, there was extensive evidence in the record in that proceeding that wind farm was expected to lower overall bills. So there is a cost to it, but at the end of the day, I mean, what everybody agreed to, and this isn't just a state employee's position, but every other, the industrial customers and everybody else that paid their own hard-earned money to be in the case, ultimately everybody agreed that wind farm was best for customers. So I think it's a great question. It's a complicated answer, and it really is case by case by case. That's the way we look at it, is every additional wind farm or solar farm or brand new natural gas plant or coal-fired generation unit that they want to maintain. The question is reliability first, and then affordability and minimizing overall costs. And it's a big, complicated question, but it's a good question, difficult one to answer.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. I would say I'd go back to where I talked earlier today in the integrated resource plan and the 20-year look forward that we look at. Our effort in that process is to find the most optimal from a cost perspective way to meet the needs of our customers over that 20 years. And what it consistently shows is right now a solution that includes all of the options for supply, be it natural gas or coal or nuclear or wind or solar, in relative proportions, is the best way to do that to protect the reliability and affordability for customers. But we look at it all the time with all the parties, and every year we refresh it to see if it tells us a different answer.
You really believe that?
I really do.
One comment, since 2000.
Can we save the comments for the comment period, please? And because we have, it looks like 3 more questioners, then we'll take a break. Thank you.
Hi, Vi Bierman from Olathe. And I just have a problem with the disparity in between the rate changes between the ECM and the ECC, because I feel like as a monopoly, I understand that we need probably to have a rate increase because everything else is increased. I don't think it's fair to say, hey, your energy's not going to increase also. But I think it should be spread evenly over the whole area and everybody get charged the same amount, not the rural part and Olathe, maybe a few of the communities get charged a larger amount. And I keep thinking, who lives in Overland Park? Are all the employees from Evergy in Overland Park? I mean, and that's what I'm sitting there thinking as I'm reading this, when I look at the disparity in the amount that we're going to be charged. And that's basically my question.
Was the question where the Evergy employees lived? I'm not sure
No,
what.
it's like why disparity?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I tried to answer it in my comments, but I think the best way I can say it is the costs that are being incurred to serve the system that supports Central are distinguishable from the costs that are being incurred to serve Metro. So we try and charge customers specific to the costs that are being incurred. That's what we're required to do. That's what the regulation suggests needs to happen. And while that creates a disparity, the flip side of that would be if we didn't incur those costs to serve Metro customers probably don't want to pay a flat share to pick up a piece of what we incurred to serve Central customers.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, great minds think alike. This my topic addresses what the woman ahead of me said as well. My name is Melanie, and I have interest in Shawnee as well as Baldwin City. And so the first part of my question is for you, Mr. Ives, and the follow-up is for staff. And it is exactly that. In your presentation, Mr. Ives, you said something, and I would like for you to address what that something is. And I believe you've been trying, but I don't get a clear sense of what that something is. Something is added to Metro, but built to Central. And then for staff, you addressed a bunch of fairness questions, government laws dealing with fairness. How is it fair to shift the burden of hosting the renewables? I mean, the burden of hosting renewables is mainly in the central area. So how is that fair for the people in Metro to gain from that, I guess?
So I'll take that first one on the I'll call them the common cost. So one of the benefits when we combine the companies is we no longer need to have two IT systems to bill customers or two IT systems to keep our financial records. Well, when we've consolidated over this 5 years and gone to one system, the one system sets on one set of books. And by and large, our IT sets on the Metro books. And then we bill out usage of that system to Central as well as to our Missouri jurisdictions so that everybody pays a proportionate share, which has turned out to be part of that benefit that I talked about, because otherwise we would have 3 accounting systems and they would all look the same and we'd have, 3 times the cost. So now we take one, put it on one person's books and we bill it to the other folks that are using it.
So I'm sorry, just to clarify. So the Metro, the IT cost. So I guess what exactly is added to Metro but billed to Central? That's the build part is what.
Yeah, so when we combine a system, let's call it a system that generates the bills that gets into customers. There's a IT software and a system cost that for that to work. That's on Metro, but everybody uses it. So we bill Central a piece of the cost for Metro. So that way, everybody, when we come in for a case like this, is paying their proportionate share of that one system.
Okay, so how is this fair?
What I think, maybe helps is it's true that Evergy Kansas Central and Evergy Kansas Metro, I mean, they're both Evergy companies. there was a merger, there is common ownership, common accounting systems and IT. But most of the physical assets, the power plants, the transmission lines, distribution lines, there's 30 or 40 years of history that accumulated up the costs of those two separate utilities. So there isn't any direct transfer. When there is a transfer and Metro is charging Central, they're doing it based on a fully distributed cost methodology, which just says, fancy word to say, you're only paying your fair share, right? It's something, I'm a Central customer, right? My mom and my sister are. So we have employees who are focused solely on that question of how are they splitting the cost between these two businesses, because the utilities themselves are still legally separate entities. They have separate rates, they have separate customers, separate tariff books, separate service territories for RISA purposes that, that customers pay into different power plants. If you remember back during Winter Storm Uri, Evergy Kansas Metro customers where this area sits right here actually made a profit. The customers did $6 a month for a year. Central customers, based on their mix of generation, based on, they have a little bit more gas, they have a little less relative exposure to nuclear and wind. They actually incurred $2.32 a month for 2 years, even though both utilities are owned by the Evergy corporate umbrella. And that's not because anything nefarious is going on. It's because those are the real costs to serve those customers. If the Persimmon Creek Wind Farm, that's very much an open issue that the commission's going to have to decide. Evergy wants to recover it from Evergy Kansas Central customers. Evergy Kansas Central customers will get all the revenue from that wind farm from the SPP integrated marketplace, and Metro won't, right? Metro won't get any benefit. They won't get any costs, right? So there is true, for now anyway, until the rates are consolidated. That took 20 years, the last merger, right? With the old KPL and KG&E system, the old Westar North and South. It took 20 years to consolidate those rates. And I don't know how long it'll take for this case, but there is still there's a disparity in different costs. So that's, I don't know, hopefully that helps.
Okay, I just want to recap. So Metro customers do not reap the benefits of Persimmon Wind facility.
That's right.
Correct?
And
Okay.
Metro customers are not being asked. That's not a factor that's contributing to Metro's rate increase request. It's Central only that it's being requested to be recovered from.
Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Kathy from Olathe. The mention of time of use as a way for individuals to control their bills, I'll say. My question is simple. Is this rate just for residents or for businesses as well?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Time of use, first thing I want to reiterate in the state of Kansas and in Evergy's proposal is it is an opt-in voluntary rate that residential customers can choose. So we don't have a significant amount of time of use rates that are proposed for commercial or industrial. It's really focused on residential opportunities to conserve during the hottest periods. Well, the rate increase covers everybody. The time of use is kind of the way it flows.
Okay, this will be the last question.
Yes,
So
sir. Mary
Thank you.
from Lenexa, lifelong Kansas resident. My understanding is there's also going a rate increase request for Missouri residents as well under the Evergy umbrella. My question, how many customers are there? What's the percentage increase requested for them? And what's your estimated average for them? Thank you.
That's a great question. I may have to follow with some specifics. But what I can tell you is there's not a current request out for Missouri customers because we went through rate cases last year and changed rates for Missouri last year. So we also last had a case in Missouri in 2018. In Missouri, we were back in 4 years. In Kansas, we're back in 5. So we had a request. I can't remember the specifics on that. I've been focused on Kansas for a little bit. But we might be able to find that out and maybe we can have somebody, touch base with you, on a break or at the end.
Yeah, thank you to everybody for your questions. This will conclude the question and answer session of the portion of the evening. We'll pause a little bit to let the commissioners come back in, to let everybody stretch their legs, a quick bathroom break, and maybe cool down in the lobby. Hopefully it's cooler there than it is in here. And then we'll bring the commissioners back. We'll start part 2, where you'll have the opportunity to make comments to the commissioners. Thank you.
It's like an isolation. Oh, hopefully this factor maybe. Yeah. I forgot it. I'm right here back. They will review them. Yeah, the appropriate. Okay. They file it.
up. For those participating by Zoom, please use the raise hand feature, and we will alternate between our live participants and Zoom participants as needed. To ensure that everyone who wishes to speak has the opportunity, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and we do have a timer. Okay. You know, it's kind of like technical difficulties when you have this much technology going on, but we're glad to be able to have Zoom for those who could not drive in for whatever reason. So, okay, I think we're all right. Anyway, we're going to start with the list. And I have Karen Sorensen, and I would like you to announce your name when you come to the mic and where you're from. That's important as well. So Karen Sorensen, followed by Lynn Levine. Karen, are you still in the room and the mic is there? Okay, Lynn, are you here? Lynn's outside. All right, why don't we move on to Tara Wilkie? Tara, there she is. And we'll have Robert Zoller, if Robert will be ready next. Okay, so we're going to go with Tara and then Robert, and then if Lynn's coming back, we'll catch you the third one. How's that? All right. All right, please.
Thank you, commissioners. My name is Teresa Wilkie. I live in Lawrence, Kansas. I want to say first up that everybody in this room is aware that Evergy is a utility monopoly and has no competition, whether it's a natural monopoly or not. I believe Evergy should not profit from providing a public service to the consumer. Now, I want to ask the commission, what do you believe is the average income of the consumers in this room? Anywhere near the profits of the Evergy Corporation? We are not in the same class as Evergy. And yet Evergy wants a rate increase and gives us a lot of data except for how much profit they have to do these improvements that they would like to do. It's a flat out scandal that by the merger between Evergy, between Westar and KCP&L, they realize almost 100% savings. That was bad business before, and it makes me wonder, are they having good business now? I'm an environmentalist, and I want to suggest that Evergy needs to tighten its belt, use their profits to create electricity for the consumers who will pay for the electricity that we use, and do try to use more sustainable sources of energy. One of the reasons I believe Evergy wants to go up in the rate, the price of coal goes up. One of the reasons I believe Evergy wants to go up on the rate is they want to build more renewable because that's much less expensive for them. And then they get to sell it at a higher rate to the average consumers in the room. So I do encourage the use of renewable energy. It's less expensive, it's better for the planet. I know I am one of the few people in the room that feels that way, but thank you for letting me give my opinion.
Thank you. Robert Zoller, followed by Lynn.
My name is Robert Zoller, and I'm from Paola, Kansas. And I want to make one factual statement. For every renewable energy facility we put up, every wind turbine that is put up, or each wind turbine is put up, our electric rates go up. One gentleman, because you're double dipping on capital and you get a guaranteed return on capital. And it goes back to my question from before, but here's my prepared statement. A few years back, the Sierra Club sued Kansas City Power and Light, which now is Evergy, over the fact that they didn't have the proper permitting on the expansion of the generating capacity of the ITAN power plant. The suit put a stop to the construction project that was well on its way with hundreds of millions of dollars already spent. Not having the proper permitting was a major mistake of the top executives and attorneys at Kansas City Power Lake. And the executives knew that a lawsuit could drag on for years, which would strand millions of dollars of already spent money, which would delay or permanently not allow KCP&L to get a return on their capital. I can't imagine the panic in the executive suites and the dread of knowing that their jobs were on the line and at risk due to their negligence. When a utility agent, and in this case, the top executive lawyers, made a mistake that led to the lawsuit that would cost them millions, and that cost couldn't be legally passed on to the ratepayers and would have to be paid by the shareholders. Some very creative settlement negotiations took place. For example, when Pacific Gas and Electric executives made a mistake that caused the Paradise fires that led to billions in damages, the shareholders had to pay. KCP&L executives knew that they couldn't pass on the cost of their mistake to the ratepayers, and if the stockholders had to pay, they would be have the risk of losing their jobs. The solution was a settlement that gave the Sierra Club what they wanted and could also enrich the executives and shareholders of KCP&L. One part of this settlement was for KCP&L to build a $1.3 billion environmental project of the same power plant, which already met the requirements for the Clean Air Act, and to build 400 megawatts of wind turbine power that brought the total cost close to $2 billion. And they're going to get their 9 or 10% guaranteed return on that. This is a profitable settlement for KCP&L because it added to their capital base, and they were able to get a 9+% return on that capital. Instead of their mistake costing them money, they profited and the ratepayers paid. KCP&L was able to structure this settlement because they knew that they had the vast majority of the Kansas legislature.
If you would like to submit your formal comments in writing, we will add them to the record. We will accept those if you want.
I'm almost done. Would you give me a little grace here?
A short, one, yes.
Okay. KCP&L was able to structure the settlement because they knew that they had the vast majority of the Kansas legislature in their back pocket through the lobbyists, because enough legislators are paid off, complicit, ignorant of the scam being played against them, or they are too afraid of the PAC money that KCP&L controls or influences that could be used against them in their elections.
Thank you, Mr. Zoller. Lynn? Levine,
It's me.
please.
Wow. Okay. Hi, I just want to ask about your local investors. You really didn't mention, like all of them. And I'm just wondering if you have the same investors as you did in 2021, like Vanguard, who has BlackRock and the State Street Global. You still have those
Miss Levine,
investors?
can you lower the mic and then that way we can ensure, there we go.
Okay.
There, that's better. Yes.
Okay. So I'm just asking about investors. You were talking about your investors are local, and I'm just wondering if some of them are the same as you had in 2021, because that was Vanguard, who also has BlackRock and the State Street Global Advisors. Are they still your investors?
This is the comment period rather than the question period. I can have Evergy answer that after we do this. But this is really for comments on the public record. It's not to get back and forth with any of the parties.
It's not back and forth. Just
I understand, but this is not the question period. I think they'd probably be happy to answer that afterwards or at a break, but
I
this
only
is for
saw
the
one
comment.
form out there about the comments, and that's what I signed up for, and I didn't realize. it was
I understand.
Well, it seems like if you can't answer it, it's our your investors. So, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Levine. Next, Dennis Bolin. Mr. Bolin. Followed by Jane Whittier.
Dennis Bolton, Spring Hill. 5 years ago or so, whatever, before the merger, I was on even level payment plan. My bill was $134.43 each month. 3 months after the merger, my bill went to $142.43. This past month, it was $182.43. And I haven't changed anything. In 2022, in early part of 23, it varied between 189.43 and 208.43. And anyway, what I'm trying to say is, I'm 77 years old. I had to go back to work to pay my bills. And these other folks my age, how in the world are we going to keep paying the bills if prices keep going up? I got air conditioning, yes. It's set at 78 to 80 degrees. I've installed a solar powered attic fan to take the hot air out of the attic to keep the house cooler. Water heater in the house, yeah, I've got an electric water heater, but I put a timer on it. It's only runs 4 hours a day. The rest of the day it's shut off. In the wintertime, I've installed a wood burning furnace. I get the wood from these different tree cutters that I went around and talked to, and they deliver the wood to the house. And I cut up the wood and split it myself, so I can keep the house warm instead of using the electric furnace in the house. The house has double pane windows. And, you know, yes, Kansas City Fire and Light or Evergy, they do a darn fine job of furnishing electricity. I'm not knocking the energy company. I need some way to keep the bills down. These other folks that are my age, how in the world are we going to keep paying these bills if the bills keep going higher? One of these days, we're going to have to make a choice between eating or sleeping out in the cold because we can't afford anything anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolin. Jane Whittier.
My name is Joyce Whittier and I live in Shawnee.
I'm
I've
sorry, Joyce. I apologize. Joyce Whittier. Yes.
I moved to Kansas City in 1966, and I've been a customer of Kansas City Power and Light, which is now Evergy, for that entire time. And I'm fond of saying that the Kansas Corporation Commission never met a rate increase it didn't like. According to the chairman of the Climate Protection Steering Committee, the time of use rates can increase the cost for renters who have little control over how efficient their homes are. I live in an apartment and I have no control over that. On February 16th, the Topeka Capital Journal reported that data from the U.S. Energy Administration says that Kansas has the highest retail price for electricity in the region, trailing only Minnesota. And that's the Kansans for lower electric rates also said the same thing. According to them, Kansas generated 39.85% more electricity than it consumed in 2021. I found out that Evergy, without notifying me, had installed a smart meter. I only found that out when I asked about how my bill was calculated. They figure my bill in 15-minute increments, and different times of the day there are billed at different amounts. They've mentioned, I mean, there are some inherent problems with smart meters, one of which is that they're known to spontaneously combust. They also allow Evergy to cut the electricity off when the grid is overloaded. I was not aware that Evergy operates in Oklahoma. I thought it was Kansas and Missouri. So why are Kansas being asked to pay the $250 million that it cost to purchase the Persimmon Creek wind farm in Oklahoma? You've already given the eminent domain rights to NextEra so that they can run transmission lines from Wolf Creek into Missouri. And now you're forcing Kansas to foot the bill for electricity from another state. All this electricity goes into the Southwest Power Pool. We have no control over where it goes. It can go to one of 15 different states, whoever is paying the highest rate at the moment. It's not fair to Kansas to ask for this,
Michelle, can we turn down the bell? That even startles me. Okay. Thank you. And I would remind folks too, if you want to submit your comments in writing, we will take those as well. You can send them to us like in snail mail. You can send them to us electronically, or if you just want to give them to us tonight, we'll take them if that's helpful to you. Okay, thank you, Joyce. Next we have Galen Van Horn and Elaine Giesel.
Actually, it's Galen Van Horn, and I'm from Lenexa. Evergy, we have found out tonight, is a natural monopoly. So my question is, why do I then get a monthly customer charge of $14.25? I don't have any choice.
You still have time. That was
Okay.
a test. No, that's not been 3 minutes yet.
Of course, an Evergy rate increase also means my taxes will increase. In Johnson County, this means an additional 1.475% on any increase, and a city sales tax for me of 1.375% again on any increase. And that of course is of a concern to me. Our Kansas tax structure is already extremely high, especially for those of us on a fixed income. Will our county and city taxes decrease when Evergy increases their rate? Not a chance. You may think this is a fraction of the total amount, but every fractional amount adds up. In addition to an increase in electricity costs, is my understanding that effective October 1st of this year, Evergy will begin charging more for electricity that is used between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. Since hearing this, I have monitored my home's air conditioning temperature, and based on a small sampling, keeping my home at 82 degrees with 3 ceiling fans, 2 stand fans, and windows covered. Several windows are double covered. My home would remain at 82 degrees until 8 p.m. Well, turning it down quickly is not the right thing to do. Really, this is not how I want to live. Currently on the Evergy website there, I noticed a time of use, and I can see the night, weekend, standard, and even use. I'm not sure if these will be the true time of use that will be offered to us, and I'm not sure how we opt out because that obviously is not there at this point. I don't believe Missouri has a chance to opt out of anything. On April 20th, 23, Evergy sent me a notice indicating that a credit of approximately $6.60 per month or $79.20 for a year would be credit on my bill. However, they further indicated that it will not appear as a separate line item. So how do I know that I'm receiving this credit? Their billing structure is extremely difficult to understand. Yes, I have contacted customer service and they merely read the flyer's notice and are unable to answer my question. Interestingly, Evergy filed for their increase on April 25th of this year. It appears Energy's request increase would be an average of $3.47. And based on monthly credit for 12 months, this credit would almost cover my increase for 2 years. Energy is extremely important, and I would request that they do not get their requested rate increase. Thank you.
Thank you. After Ms. Giesel, we will go to several of our Zoom participants.
Thank you. My name is Elaine Giesel. I'm a resident of Overland Park and a customer of Evergy. As chair of the Kansas chapter of the Sierra Club, thank you, folks, I am delivering the following remarks on behalf of almost 5,000 members across the state. They are committed to fighting the climate crisis, promoting environmental justice, protecting public health, and conserving wild Kansas. Our planet is burning, literally in Canada, where wildfire smoke is spreading poor air quality as far south as Kansas. Prolonged heat waves have scorched the southern half of our nation, especially threatening our most vulnerable populations, the young, the old, the poor, and outdoor workers. Sea surface temperatures have reached record levels. Florida recorded ocean temperatures approaching 100 degrees. On the 4th of July, the global average temperature set an all-time record. Talk about fireworks. The latest UN report, Climate Change 2023, notes with high confidence, human activities, principally through emissions of greenhouse gases, have unequivocally caused global warming, and global greenhouse gas emissions have continued to increase. Evergy's rate increase proposal comes upon the release of their new energy plan, which extends the life of its coal-fired facility in Lawrence, reduces investments in renewable energy, and calls for building 2 new gas-powered plants. This public monopoly is overinvested in fossil fuels and underinvested in affordable renewable energy, energy storage, and energy efficiency programs that could actually save customers hundreds of millions of dollars. There are serious social justice and environmental equity implications with raising rates. The less affluent will find their energy burdens increasing. Low-income households, often in overburdened minority communities, already pay a disproportionately high part of their income on utilities and have fewer resources to cope with climate change. They are the most vulnerable to heat island effects, and they will die because of that. Utilities such as Evergy are allowed to exist because they are public service, but they and the agencies which regulate them must take responsibility for external impacts. Until Evergy addresses the full impacts of their operations on our health and on our environment, commits to promoting energy efficiency, and replaces fossil fuel burning facilities with renewable sources, as previously promised, they should not be rewarded for bad behavior. We don't do that for our children. We don't do it for our pets. And KCC shouldn't do it for Evergy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giesel. Brian?
Yes, thank you. Our first Zoom caller is Debbie Detmer. Ms. Detmer?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, I'm Debbie Detmer of Shawnee, and we need energy decentralization. Let homeowners try and produce as much power as they can instead of capping how much electricity they can produce. Evergy and others should welcome the opportunity for consumers to create unlimited power that is fed back into the Evergy grid to share with other homeowners. One would think so anyway, but that isn't what the agenda is about. More money to invest in even more failing infrastructure of new Green Deal while retiring valuable coal plants. It's a no thank you. Stop the insanity against physics. the wind, the sun, and the increased infrastructure for electric cars and electric lines limits exist there. No to the funding, this infrastructure, and no to the price increase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next Zoom caller is Rayan Makaram with Clean Air Now. Please proceed.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, and apologies if I mangled your name.
No, you got it right. It's Ryan McCarran with Clean Air Now, and I'm sorry I couldn't be in the room with you today. I was at BPU on Wyandotte County discussing the same topic that we're discussing today for Evergy for the rest of Kansas. And as for Clean Air Now, as a community organization, I do work in Wyandotte County, but I personally live in Fairway, Kansas, and I am asking to not approve of this rate increase in rate for Evergy. And I believe all the points have already been made by previous commenters that really hit the nail on the head. This utility should be working to ensure the best type of energy diversity for all of us at a cost that does not get passed on to the consumers. And as such, their reliance until today and on even more for the future on continuing use of coal, which continues to increase in cost, unfortunately. And these are the costs that are going to keep on getting passed to us. I just wanted to mention that renewable energies that have been slightly disparaged by others in the room today, I understand their initial high costs, but if run properly, and I hope that Evergy can do that, we can do that with supervision, that the costs do not get passed on or double dipping, as has been mentioned. So I don't have much to say. It's already been said by everyone in the room. This increase in rate should not be approved as is. I think there should be deeper discussions into what the future holds for Evergy, for all of Kansas, and the type of energy that is needed. We think we're always asking for renewable energy, and we should stop our dependence on fossil fuels. We saw what happened when extreme weather events where our rates go up or we have to pay the cost because the cost of gas or the cost of coal will go up as demand increases. Thank you for allowing me to comment today, and we will be submitting our written comments to the on this docket officially for Clean Air Now. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Mary Grimm and Brad Van Arsdale. Mary, good. Brad, are you here? Okay, following Mary will be, what about Dustin? Dustin Dake? Okay, very good. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you again for having these public hearings. It's really important to all of us, as you can see, and a lot of people who couldn't afford to be here and or may not even be aware due to their busy schedules and taking care of their families and things like that. While I do disagree with passing the cost on to the consumer, I am appreciative of the fact that Evergy continues to invest in renewable energy, such as the wind facility and things like that. I am extremely appreciative, as I said before, of the people who work for you and brave all kinds of weather and things like that. I think I pretty much voiced most of my concerns. I do have numerous questions, but I will submit things formally in writing for the committee. Thank you again for these public hearings.
Thank you, Mary. Dustin?
Good evening. My name is Dustin Dade. I'm from Olathe. I'll be as quickly as I possibly can, 3 minutes. So the request that the customers of Evergy take a burden of a 9.7% increase in their monthly bill flies in the face of the information they have posted on the website as of July 15th or July 13th today. Their website states the following: since becoming Evergy, we committed to fewer and smaller rate increases and no base rate changes for at least 4 years. I would like to know how they square 9% increase with smaller rate increases. 9% is not a small rate increase. In fact, it is the largest I have ever seen as a customer of Evergy and formerly KCP&L. This equates to over $173 annually to an average customer. The reasoning for the 9% increase is the following: higher expenses related to depreciation and infrastructure upgrades, expiration of wholesale contracts, and the end of corporate-owned life insurance program from 1985. On the Evergy website, they list that they are, quote, keeping rates below inflation because you deserve affordable power. They go on. The average inflation rate is not at a record high from the grocery or now at a record high from the grocery store to the gas pump. We are all feeling the impact of rising costs. So it's probably hard to believe that we've actually lowered our rates. We've become even more efficient, finding savings, reducing costs, and passing those savings on to you. Here's how: lowering our costs by cutting hours. We committed to reducing 26% of our operational costs by 2025 because working more efficiently means more savings for you. Who is getting the savings in this scenario when the customers are now being asked to absorb a 9% increase in their monthly bill? And this is before the 2025 deadline of a 26% reduction in operational costs. So again, where is the need for this increase in the company? So I then looked at the documentation that they submitted on April 24th. One submitted by Jason O'Humphrey on page 13. He stated that some of the cost increase are by steel prices jumping 100 to 185%. What he fails to mention is that anyone that looks at the commodities stock exchange index on any market website, steel was at its second highest or second lowest price in 2020 since 2009. And the upper price of steel today only matches the high of 2011. Factoring in inflation since 2011, steel is actually cheaper today than it was 12 years ago. Am I cherry picking statements? Absolutely, because that's what Evergy does. They're witnesses in their testimonies before the Kansas State Corporation on April 25th. And I have to admit, I only peeked at these documents today because I have a full-time job as a strategy manager. I don't get paid to fact check lazy cherry-picked evidence supplied to the commission. But even an hour's effort shows the lack of planning and evidence around this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Roush. Bill? CC Blessing, followed by Harrison Dollar.
How many people in this audience are retired? How many are on a fixed income? How many just had their property taxes raised? All those not standing up, we'll talk to. How many can expect an increase in their financial health over the next 2 years? Financial wealth. Very few of us. I don't oppose what Evergy is doing because we need energy. And it's going to be a long time coming if we don't admit that cost of business has to be passed on to the consumer. It depends on how much of that is passed on to the consumer and whether it's done in a proper methodology. I don't argue with a rate of 3%, and I don't argue with a rate of 5%. 9% I start to squeak just a little bit. And if you add the other numbers that are into this, the $16.41, the 9%, you're averaging right around 12% increase in your energy bill. Can you handle it? I can. But I'm not going to really object to the fact that they want to do it. I need a little bit more information, a little bit more structure, and a little bit more understanding of where they put their position in front of the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Harrison Dollar, followed by Angie. Angie, okay, good. I'm glad you are. Hi, Harrison.
Hello. The rate increase is just a symptom of the issue. When you really look at it, what I believe is a big issue is really 2 points. One is that Evergy is a monopoly. No one in this audience has any other options. And when they don't have any other options, we don't have much say in this matter. What we hope And what I would really like to believe is that the corporate commission does have our best interest. But I fully understand Evergy is a very big beast, one that spends a ton of money lobbying, that lobbies at every level. And the fact that there's little transparency, even though my question was very clear, was not answered. And you're right, every business does have the right to pursue their best interests. But when it's a monopoly and when the customers are held hostage and are not allowed to have any other choices, the matter becomes a little bit different. When you're taking legislators to Chief, Royals, and sporting games, the matter becomes a little bit different. So the issue really comes down to the point that we don't need monopoly in Kansas. People are suffering. What we need is competition. Competition drives the prices down. This company needs accountability. And if this commission does not find it deep within to bring this accountability, then maybe this commission, this body, should be electable. So then accountability can be ensured. This should be a much more transparent and democratic process. So that is why I urge you strongly to consider not approving these rate increases and to make sure that monopolies like this don't have their disadvantaged customers suffer. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison. Angie?
Angie.
Yes.
Angie Sheepwreck from Prairie Village, Kansas. I had some plumber issues this morning, so I really didn't have enough time to prepare my remarks. And I looked up some information on the internet, and so I can't really attest to how accurate it is. But here's an employee of Evergy, David Camel. His yearly compensation, $6.89 million every year. And here is Kirkland Andrews, compensation $3.05 million. Kevin Bryant, $2.5 million. Heather Humphrey, $1.74 million. Greg Greenwood, $2.28 million. Charles, I can't read my writing, something or other, $1.68 million. Additionally, I believe there are 13 board of directors, and collectively together, they are earning 3.86 million. So these people are taking in a total of 22 million. Okay, I hope I don't get in trouble with all of that. And like I say, I'm not sure how accurate it is. I didn't have time. And then I wondered, where are some of these board of directors people living? And I didn't have time to look it up. I recognized two names. One was in Indiana, I believe. Maybe one is in Louisiana, but I'm not sure. I didn't have time. So I would like to suggest this idea. We have wonderful universities here in the state of Kansas. I believe they prepare business leaders for tomorrow. So could we maybe think about retiring some of these high dollar earners with some of these younger people coming out of Kansas universities? I do appreciate your time here this evening. I've learned an awful lot, and I thank you. And please do not give, I almost said KCP&L, Evergy these rate increases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angie. Jim Hull and John Coffran. Jim Hull, are you here? Let's start there. Yes, he is. John, are you here? Okay. And then we'll follow that with one Zoom. Good evening.
Good evening. I was looking at the bar graph that was provided earlier of the breakdown of the $204 million. If you total the first bar at 146 million and compare it to the other three bars, they come out to the same number. So 50% of that request deals with new, and I'll quote it, new infrastructure investment. New infrastructure investment. Now, I am concerned that I only saw one bar for 146 million. I have requested further information by question as to how that 146 million is being applied. Where's it going? What is it being used for? Because that is 50% of the requested increase. That doesn't make sense. Yes, investment for future, but 50% increase for new investments. Now, I'm further concerned because none of that $146 million should be utilized to accommodate private developers. And I've been observing some things where poles have been moved, and that costs. And I know electric lines are being run underground, and that costs for a new housing development. Now, why is that money, or is it? I want to know if it is. I don't know for sure until I get the information. But is that money being used to support a private development? And I'm not going into the other stories I've heard about what's happening with some of the threats made to residents around that development. Threats of eminent domain if they don't comply with what they want. And that's a private developer, and it's not for public use. They're selling those properties. And I'll stop there because I'm going to submit a further comment once I get that further information as to how they're spending that $146 million or intend to. Thank you.
Thank you. John, followed by Carlos.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is John McCoffrin. I'm a former Army intelligence analyst. I take big data sets, make them into pretty pictures for generals and NATO and stuff. Doctor's degrees, all they want is picture books in kindergarten, so go figure. Well, real quick, my father is after high school did 6 years Navy nuclear engine operator. Last 30 years boiler operator. I ran for Kansas 3rd against Amanda Atkins. I obviously lost. Some of you guys are appointed by the governor, Laura Kelly, after the last 4.5 years, and the other ones have to answer. My father always states that the frontline guys are completely different because they're patriots compared to the upper ends that are usually answering to the Democrat Party. My father also states that there's two major powers of generation, which powers of generation is the essence of how electric companies make money. Base load versus variable load. Now, I asked the question earlier, what were the four most productive, high return on investment power plants? One, nuclear. 93.5% of the time it's creating power, except for the times it needs to go down for service. Last 100 years pays itself off in 6. Kansas has one, Wolf Creek Nuclear. The second best is trash to steam. Takes trash, burns it, turns it to power, 80%. Last 50 years pays itself off in 5. The third best is natural gas, which Kansas doesn't have many of those, 56%. Coal, 47%, can obviously last 60 years, pays itself off in 5 years. The two ones that have no return on investment are wind at 34% production, lasts about 20 years, pays itself off in 10.5. That means it has 9.5 years to pay for the operation plus teardown. Solar runs at 24%. 50% of the time, it's dark out. You don't get any power. When it's daytime, you got sun, clouds. You got to make sure you got the proper wind, right angle at the sun. Which also solar power, solar panels, 80% right now are made in China, using slaves, soon to be 95%. With that being said, I want to make sure one thing is very clear. 6 power plants produce 50% of the power in Kansas. Wolf Creek Nuclear does 20%. The other 5 power plants are coal. The most, and let me point this out too. They take up about 35,000 acres. You, sir, over there with the glasses, just saying, stated that Flat Ridge 2, the most powerful wind farm in Kansas, west of Wichita, produces a return on investment. I highly doubt it. It takes up 66,000 acres, 300 wind turbines for only 3% of the power. Now, one of the things I talked about last year was making sure that we all have proper agendas, whether it's federal, state, and even state boards and stuff like that. What you should be pushing for is 2 more nuclear, that we have a consistent baseload, especially with all these EVs coming in. They use 350,000 black slaves for cobalt. I'm almost done, finished my closing statement. 2 more coal power plants and 2 trash to steam. Because the simple fact is, when you sit there and you state to push more green energy, more solar panels, and more wind turbines, you're increasing our costs, paying utilities and paying taxes, which hurts the poor. So stop lying. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Carlos, Rondon, and then I'm not sure, Viola Brennan. Judy, Viola Brennan. Okay, Carlos will go.
Okay, thank
Good
you.
evening.
All right, I'm gonna do 3 minutes, 4 points.
You want to move the mic down a little
Okay,
bit and then
that's good. Can you hear me? Okay.
there we go.
So I'm gonna, there is 4 points. The first one, as an engineer, I know the concept of reliability of system pretty well. There are many PhD students, dissertations about how to support a system like that. The wind generation and solar panels are not able to react as fast as you have there as a base generation with the coal. So we are the reason, if Evergy doesn't do the job properly, we could be in a situation that we have blackouts, similar in Texas or happened in Germany. The people will suffer in the winter, and then we have to buy energy from Colorado based on fuel cells or fuel fossil generation, which is, it can happen. The planet should be very careful. The other point, number 2, is the pollution of the solar panels in the future. No one has talked about that. 20 years from now, we're gonna have a problem in pollution, and also the wind generation has some pollution issues too, and affect the birds. Plus the impact on the farming. We're gonna use extensive amount of farming to generate. The third point is, if we're gonna approve this kind of increase, we should engage Evergy in making contributions to universities like KU, K-State, or Missouri, to do research in clean coal. It's a technology that liquefies the coal and extract the pollutants and you use it. There are tremendous amount of research all over the world in coal. So they're trying to demonize the coal. The coal is good. You have to develop a new technology that is there. It's very expensive, but if you put your mind on that, money, things will happen. You put institutions engaged in this as one of the ways to approve this increase, engage energy in contributing to the universities to research. And number 4 is a good, interesting topic, just for information. In the world, how many coal plant units are in operation? In United States, 225. India, 285. China, 1,118. So no one is talking about that. So what are we doing here in Kansas? Okay, we're shut down 2 power plants, but what is done in China? And the interesting thing is that the transitions, we're gonna buy solar panels from China. So why don't we use this opportunity to put some restrictions on that, unless China shows that we're doing the same that we're doing here, putting our customers to stress, increases in prices, but they don't show anything. So what happened? It's an important point that just want to share with you before my time is over. Thank you.
Thank you. Mel Schrock, Doug Hoppick, Doug, Gary Wilms, Okay. Now, if you did not hear your name called because I didn't say that well, or you just want to speak and you haven't signed up, why don't you come on up and raise your hand and is there anybody else who wants to speak?
Do you want to take a Zoom call or?
Why don't we take this gentleman right here and then we'll take a
Okay.
Zoom caller. Okay. If you'll state your name and where you're from, please.
Thomas Nelson, Overland Park. I just want to say that I want to make sure that when you guys are looking over this increase, that any outside influence by any shareholders or any outside groups or anything is carefully scrutinized. One of the things that I was reading about before I decided to come here tonight was about Elliott activist group, which added 2 shareholders onto, or board members onto the Evergy board. And so I really think that you should carefully scrutinize and pay attention to what they're doing to make sure that the public interest is served and not the interest of any outside activist billionaire investors. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take our Zoom participant, Brian.
Sure. Thank you. April Rifen.
Good evening.
You pronounced it correctly. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a lucky guess. Thanks.
Okay, I wanted to just start with saying that I've been a long time Evergy customer, and I do very much appreciate the reliability of the service through all the weather extremes that we enjoy here in Kansas. I also find the mobile app very helpful in monitoring and modifying my daily usage. It's a good tool to have. Having said that, I wanted to address the way the gentleman from Evergy addressed the questions regarding profits that had been disclosed. I think it's somewhat confusing to the Evergy public when you say, well, the profits aren't really the profits. The profits are the recovery of prior investments. So I think it might be very helpful to your public if when you disclose your financials, you had a breakdown between what was actually recovered investment and what was true profit. That might help people understand why you're asking for increases. No one begrudges you a fair profit, but what is a fair profit and how much profit is enough? That's all I have to say.
Thank you, April. Okay, yes, if you could introduce yourself and where you're from, please.
Thank you. I'm Ty Gorman. I'm the Sierra Club representative for Kansas and wanted to first speak to the gentleman in the fancy suit that came up earlier and quoted some very, very wrong numbers on prices for clean energy. Solar and wind especially are assuredly the cheapest form of energy when they're running. That's why they sell into the market in all those times. The Sierra Club has presented tons of evidence, and there's a lot of evidence everywhere on how cheap clean energy is and how.
Sir, this is, excuse me, this is not an opportunity to debate. You had your time to comment, and if we could let Mr. Gorman also comment, thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to invite everyone watching and listening to look up the prices on energy and confirm those, because clean energy is the cheapest way to go forward. Oklahoma PSO, just south of Wichita, recently approved through the commission there, who's a very conservative commission, a plan to switch all their fossil fuels off, all their coal off before 2030 and have a clean energy plan come into place, and then they're reducing prices from that plan for customers after the second year because it's so cost effective to change to clean energy. So I would love to see a similar plan from Evergy and other utilities I wanted to use this time that I have left to share some of the 75 comments I've received in writing from our members in the Sierra Club across the state. I just chose a few to share until my time runs out here because I wanted to represent their comments and their time here. The first says, please tell Evergy to close the Lawrence coal plant and not to invest in gas power plants. Tell them to put my family's needs first and invest in cheap, clean energy. Don't make us rely on failing expensive coal and pay more for it. Consider the future and convert to clean energy. Just to be clear, each one of these sentences is a separate commenter that I'm just sharing. I'll present these also in writing. Charging customers more for energy that's produced by the same old dirty generation is two slaps in the face. Evergy should be required to perform as well as energy monopolies in other states. I'm very angry about Evergy's irresponsible choices and the negative impact on Kansans' health, environment, and financial well-being. All of my solar generation goes to the grid during peak usage periods at zero cost to Evergy, yet they're fighting to pay me for any of it because they're a monopoly and want to own everything and charge customers more. Perhaps their business plan should be updated to reward affordability, not ownership of expensive coal or gas plants prior to any rate increase approvals. Customer dollars should be invested in affordable, reliable, clean energy options, not failing coal plants that shovel our money into the pockets of coal companies and monopoly utility shareholders. Was that a warning or was that the end of my time?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have plenty more that I'll share in writing. Thank you so much.
Yes, and Mr. Gorman, you can share those comments in writing to us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Folks, I'm looking around the room. Is there anybody else who would like to come before the mic? I know this is difficult and you feel if you don't want to stand before the mic and make your comments, please share them with us. I know I go through and I read them. They are provided to us and we read them. This is a big deal and we know that. So this is your opportunity to speak and he's walking to the mic. All right, very good.
Hi, my name is Mark Sutherland and I live in Bucyrus, Kansas.
Hello.
Our electric service is pitiful. I hate to say it, but it's pitiful. Anytime we get a storm, the power goes out 4 to 6 hours every time. Everybody has to get the generators out to keep sump pumps and things running. We're on the main line from the Lacine generating station and the power goes out. Oh, probably 7 or 8 years ago, they built a substation to the north and west of us. And it got worse after they built it than it did before they did build it. And I'd like to say, my son bought a house, power line runs over the top of his roof, which is against any common sense. The service entrance, and I have pictures I'll be glad to show you after the meeting. We called Evergy and they said, we'll be glad to string a line, but you're going to have to dig the trench and do all the work to run the underground to the house. We won't do it. And I just don't believe that's correct. And many years ago, we were at the point we were going to lose our homeowners insurance because of power surges coming through the power line. And we're still paying on some gadget called a meter treater, which they ought to provide free of charge to us because of the problems we had. Doubled our homeowners insurance. And like I say, Kansas City Power and Light to me is middle of the road at best. They could do a lot better job than what they do, but they just don't care about the outlying areas. And when we have a storm, we're the last ones to be restored. So I just think you folks should know, and I'll be happy to show you pictures after the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, yes, please state your name and your location.
I'm Vicki Klein. I'm from Overland Park. I do a lot of media. I have an integrity channel and I follow a lot of stuff for Johnson County, Kansas, and for the nation and actually the world. I would encourage a lot of you to watch the documentary Planet of the Humans. Sierra Club does not come out smelling well in that. Also, John's right. And the guy was originally very much pro Sierra Club, and he realized that they don't know their science. In fact, I do not know what you guys do with lobbying and the money you put out for it, but I would love it if you would get like people who really do science and take Bill Gates out. The other thing is that there is, the media is behind a lot of misinformation. I wish that the Kansas City Star would have one side for one opinion and the other side for the others. And I wish they could read each other's opinions before they respond to them, because sometimes they're just saying it. And you will get actual evidence in that when you do that. The news is we have our Senator Thompson, who has his background in science, who was talking to a to a reporter, and the reporter was getting irritated with him because he was not saying what she wanted him to say. And she said, "Who are you and how do you know you know anything about this science?" He goes, "I was the weatherman. This is my background." So she didn't even know who she was talking to. So let me tell you something. I do not know what is going on with the media and how it is so far out here, but you cannot trust them. In fact, I would trust a week-old piece of sushi on a toilet seat and a dive in Tijuana before I would trust the media. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, folks, I would like to remind everyone that the public comment period is open till 5 p.m. September 29th, and the materials handed out this evening outline the 3 ways in which comments can be submitted. In terms of next steps, the commission holds our last public hearing in Wichita on July 27th, the Lowe Auditorium at the Wichita State University Hughes Metro Complex, and we will begin at 6 p.m. Next, the commission will hold an evidentiary hearing on this matter beginning on October 9th at 9 a.m. at the commission offices in Topeka. The hearing will also be broadcast on the KCC's YouTube channel. Then the commission will issue a decision in this matter on or before January 4th, 2024. This concludes tonight's public hearing. Thank you very, very much for your participation this evening. Please be safe driving home and be well. Thank you.